In this middle game between two fierce online competitors, White is feeling a lot of pressure. That black knight on g4 is incredibly annoying, so White decides to kick it away by pushing the pawn to h3. But this is a game-losing blunder! Let us look at what this pawn push actually does. Before the pawn moved, White's pawn on g3 was safely protected by the pawn on h2. By pushing to h3, White completely abandons the g3 square. You might think this square is still defended. Let us highlight it. The g3 square looks like it is safely guarded by the pawn on f2. But look closely at the board. That f2 pawn is completely paralyzed. The powerful black bishop sitting on d4 is pinning that pawn straight to the white king. The pawn cannot move, and it cannot capture. Knowing this, Black unleashes a brilliant tactical strike. The knight crashes into f2, sacrificing itself to remove the defender. Black destroys a key pawn, completely exposing the white king and opening the floodgates for the attack. White has no choice but to recapture the knight. The white rook slides over to take the knight. And now comes the crushing blow. Black captures the pawn on g3 with their pawn from the h-file. Because White carelessly pushed their h-pawn at the beginning of this sequence, there is no pawn left to recapture. And look at the absolute beauty of this final position. Black is attacking the rook on f2 with their newly placed pawn. The pawn on g3 hits the rook directly, but that rook cannot escape. It is now pinned to the king by the exact same dark-squared bishop on d4. The rook is totally trapped. Black will win the piece back on the very next move, completely shattering White's kingside and cruising to a spectacular victory.
Are you greedy enough to attack the queen?
Let me show you why sometimes that is a fatal mistake. In this 2017 rapid game, the player with the black pieces drops a colossal blunder against FIDE master J.J. Pineda. By moving the bishop to g4 to attack the white queen on h5, Black probably thinks they have neutralized White's dangerous kingside attack. The bishop is staring down the queen, demanding an answer. But they just walked right into a jaw-dropping trap. White unleashes a spectacular discovered check, leaving the queen completely hanging. Moving the bishop reveals a vicious attack from the queen directly onto the black king. The bishop on f8 is perfectly placed, acting like a sniper, cutting off the critical g7 escape square. Since the king has no legal moves, and there is absolutely no way to block the check, Black is forced to accept the queen sacrifice. The black bishop takes the queen on h5. And now for the grand finale. The fifth rank is wide open, allowing White's rook from e5 to slide over and finish the job. The rook captures the bishop on h5, delivering a glorious checkmate. This is a beautiful textbook Pillsbury's mate. The rook gives mate on the h-file directly against the king, the f8 bishop perfectly covers the escape route, and Black's own rook on g8 blocks the final escape path, sealing their doom. What a phenomenal finish. WikiPlays Chess thought he snatched a free pawn with this check, but it is actually a massive endgame blunder. Can you spot how AMZ Rashid completely turned the tables in this 2017 match? Since the king is under attack, Black simply eliminates the knight, with the bishop taking on a6. White naturally recaptures with the rook, grabbing the bishop and thinking their position is perfectly safe. But now comes the crushing blow. Black plays the brilliant pawn breakthrough by pushing the pawn to h3. By sacrificing this h-pawn, Black creates an unstoppable threat. Let us look at what happens if White tries to ignore it. If the king tries to run away to d2, Black simply captures on g2 and is ready to promote to a queen on the very next turn. What if white tries to scramble the rook back for defense, moving it down to a3? Well, it is simply too slow. Black again just takes on g2, and the promotion cannot be prevented on the g1 square. Therefore, white is forced to accept the sacrifice and captures with the g-pawn, taking on h3. But this completely opens the floodgates. Black pushes the advanced pawn forward to g2, and suddenly it is game over. There is absolutely nothing stopping this pawn from becoming a queen. The promotion square on g1 is totally vulnerable, as the white rook is hopelessly stranded on a6, on the exact opposite side of the board. It cannot swing over along the 6th rank in time to stop the inevitable. A phenomenal display of pawn power by Black.
Watch how Black's queen gets trapped in broad daylight.
In this middle game clash between Havis23 and Micah's 007, Black just played the fatal blunder. Bishop takes knight on b3. On the surface, it looks like a standard piece trade, trying to simplify the position. But watch what happens after white recaptures with the a-pawn. White takes back, and suddenly, the black queen on a3 is completely paralyzed. The newly arrived pawn on b3 perfectly covers the a4 square, while white's pawn on b4 covers a5. Every single escape square is blocked by white's rock-solid pawn structure. The queen is stuck behind enemy lines with no way out. Realizing their most powerful piece is suffocating, Black desperately pushes their a-pawn forward. Moving the pawn to a5, Black tries to challenge the b4 pawn and carve out a desperate escape route. But white calmly drops the hammer. The bishop retreats to c1. This quiet but deadly move develops the bishop and directly attacks the trapped piece along the diagonal. There is absolutely nowhere to run. Black captures the pawn as a last gasp, taking on b4, but white simply collects the royal prize. The bishop takes the queen on a3, leaving white with a massive, game-winning material advantage. A beautiful, slow-motion trapped piece puzzle that shows why you must always ensure your most valuable pieces have a safe retreat.